That morning, a thick fog blanketed the winding forest road, casting a veil between the world of humans and the wild. Evelyn Hart, a seasoned wildlife researcher, was no stranger to solitude or the unexpected, but nothing had ever prepared her for this. Curled up on the roadside was a tiny shepherd puppy, barely 2 months old, its fur damp and heavy, pale blue eyes quietly gazing at her not with fear, but as if waiting for something gentle. And then, from the underbrush, a wild figure emerged, a bobcat, silent as shadow. But instead of attacking, it did something no one would have expected. In that fleeting moment, a journey began, one that defied every instinct and rewrote the rules of nature with something far older than fear, the language of interspecies love. The fog hadn't lifted when Evelyn stopped her truck along a winding dirt road, flanked on both sides by sparse pine trees, standing like ancient sentinels. She hadn't meant to stop here, but something had flickered at the corner of her eye, a pale golden tuft, small and still, lying beside the damp roadside. As she approached, Evelyn saw that it was a puppy, soaked through, so thin that its ribs protruded beneath tangled fur. Its ears drooped, its tiny body curled tightly from the cold. But it was the eyes that held her still pale blue, misted with tears, not pleading, not afraid, just quietly waiting, as if it had known she would come. Evelyn knelt slowly, extending a hand toward the pup. It flinched slightly, then let out a soft whimper. Her heart ached, but before she could touch it, a sound sharp as a thread of wind cut through the brush behind her. Years of wilderness experience tightened her reflexes. She turned quickly and met amber eyes staring straight into hers. A bobcat, lean, powerful, draped in spotted gray-brown fur, ears tipped with those iconic black tufts. It stood motionless in the mist, not growling, not backing away. Evelyn froze. She knew well. A hungry wild bobcat could be dangerous, especially when something as vulnerable as a puppy was in reach. But then, something strange happened. Instead of pouncing or retreating, the bobcat stepped forward slowly toward the pup. Evelyn wanted to intervene, but her body stilled under the weight of the scene's stillness. The bobcat approached, stopping just a few inches away. It tilted its head, observed, and then leaned down, gently licking the puppy's head, a slow, deliberate lick, as if offering comfort. The pup whimpered again, but didn't recoil. Instead, it leaned slightly into the bobcat, seeking warmth. Evelyn didn't move. The sight unfolded beyond anything she had witnessed in all her years studying wildlife behavior. There was no predator instinct, no fight for territory, just two strangers sown wild, one abandoned, touching one another with a raw, ancient gentleness. The bobcat lingered a moment longer, then stepped back. It didn't leave. It simply sat down nearby, waiting to see what Evelyn would do. And in that moment, Evelyn understood. If she took the pup with her, she wasn't just saving a life, she might be stepping into something far deeper, a bond that nature had offered, and that she had been granted the grace to witness from the very beginning. In her mind, without speaking it aloud, she gave the bobcat a name: Mira, the one who bears witness to the extraordinary. Instead of vanishing into the woods like a shadow, Mira remained. This bobcat was not a predator, nor a lost creature. She chose to stay beside the weakened puppies, if silently declaring, she had not come to end something, but to begin. Evelyn didn't touch Leon that morning. She simply sat by her truck, clutching her camera tightly, recording each moment that defied logic. Mira never looked directly at her, yet seemed fully aware of her presence. From time to time, the bobcat glanced toward Evelyn, her ears slightly lowered, not hostile, just cautious. Then she turned back to the pup, gently licking patches of dried mud from his fur, meticulously, like a mother cleaning her young after a long, disoriented journey. By noon, Mira stood. She cast one last look at Evelyn, then nudged the puppy gently with her muzzle. Leon wobbled, unsteady, but tried to follow step by slow step. He didn't bark, didn't cower, He simply trusted. Evelyn followed at a distance far enough to avoid disturbing them, close enough not to miss a moment. She knew bobcats often made dens in low rock hollows, beneath tree roots, or near creek bends. And she was right. Mira led Leon to a wind-sheltered dip in the forest floor, covered with giant ferns and blanketed by layers of dry leaves of perfect camouflage. In the cool shade, 3 small faces waited. 3 bobcat kittens, no more than 12 weeks old, peeked out from the hollow. They hissed instinctively, a natural defense. Evelyn held her breath. Leon froze, curiosity glimmering in his eyes, his ears folded back. But Mira refused to let instinct dictate the scene. She stepped between them, licking each of her kittens gently, then turned to Leon, nudging him forward with a soft push as if offering a wordless introduction. The moment felt suspended in time. One of the kittens edged forward first, sniffing the puppy, then gently tapped his neck with its forehead. Leon didn't flinch. He simply exhaled and lay down, tail to keyed, a gesture of peace and submission. Then, that first kitten curled up beside him. The other 2 hesitated only a second longer before joining. No boundaries, no blood, just the sound of soft, uncertain breaths, searching for warmth in a quiet forest den. Evelyn watched, feeling as though she were witnessing something no textbook could explain. Mira was no longer just a mother of 3. Now, she had quietly accepted a 4th one without fur spots, without the same scent, without the same voice, but sharing the same empty space in need of warmth. And in that still afternoon, Evelyn understood. Nature does not always follow rules. Sometimes, it chooses miracles, and those who stay long enough to observe may see it take root, like a wild shoot rising from stone. Evelyn didn't leave. She pitched a small tent, about 40 meters from Mira's den, close enough to observe through her lens, far enough not to alarm anyone. Each morning, she crawled out of the tent while the forest still lay under a veil of mist, wiped the dew from her camera lens, and silently watched something she still didn't have a name for. Mira hunted regularly. Some days it was a field mouse, other times a dusky sparrow. Each time, she brought her catch back to the den and divided it evenly among her young. And strangely, there was always a portion nudged toward Leon. At first, it seemed like scraps left over, but soon it became a rightful share. Evelyn saw the look in Leon's eyes the first time Mira placed food in front of him, not frantic hunger, but stillness, as if he understood. He had been accepted. Leon began to change. His once drooping tail now perked slightly. He no longer whimpered at night, but lay quietly with the rest. He didn't bark, not once. Instead, he let out soft whimpers like a bobcat, ears twitching instinctively at the breeze. When Mira taught her cubs to stalk mice, Leon crouched low in the grass too, still as stone, so much so that Evelyn couldn't believe a shepherd pup could adapt so swiftly. They weren't the same. One was a domestic dog, the other's wild bobcats, but inside that cool, damp den, there were no boundaries. Only a shared rhythm of being still young, exploring the world through mimicry, through instinct, and through something very close to what humans might call kinship. But the forest is never fully at peace. One morning, Evelyn noticed tracks larger than usual near the area. The prints came in a line, claw marks deep in the mud. Not bobcat, definitely not dog. Wolves. At least 2, possibly 3. The night before, she had also heard an owl's call, echoing from afar, not a typical hoot, but a broken, stuttering rhythm like a warning signal. Mira seemed to know. Evelyn saw her standing silently at the mouth of the den, her back arched slightly, ears high, eyes fixed into the dark woods. From that day on, Mira no longer ventured far to hunt, keeping close to the den instead. Leon changed too, less playful, more watchful, often lying quietly beside the 3 bobcat kittens, his eyes no longer entirely carefree. The fragile peace had begun to crack. Evelyn could feel it as the night's chill seeped through her tent fabric, as the dry twigs snapped in the unseen dark. Nature had given them a miracle. But nature never stops testing what it gives. She gripped her camera lens tightly, as if holding onto something delicate. In this forest, anything could happen. And sometimes, the deepest bonds bloom right at the edge of danger. March arrived, and the forest stirred. The snow melted to reveal dark brown earth, water soaked into the roots, and the scent of damp decay rose with every step. And in those days of transition, Leon grew faster than any creature in the den. His short, sleek fur began to thicken and darken under the sun. His shoulders broadened, legs stretched no longer the wet, trembling puppy by the roadside, but a muscular young adolescent, always ready to spring at the slightest sound. And Leon began to bark. At first, it was just a few muffled sounds. Then they became deep, resonant echoes that bounced off the hillside. One day, while Evelyn was taking notes near her tent, she heard his bark ring out from deep in the forest, followed by a silence that lasted too long. That very night, Mira didn't go hunting. She lay across the den entrance, eyes wide open till morning. Evelyn understood. Mira was a mother, but a bobcat mother. Wild, discreet, surviving through secrecy. Every loud noise was a threat. Every exposed presence, a risk of death. And now, the pup she had grown to love carried a different instinct. Leon didn't know how to move quietly. Leon didn't know how to be silent. Leon was a creature of sound, and that tore something inside Mira. Evelyn saw it in her eyes. Mira watched Leon play with her cubs, bumping and chasing each other, unaware that their footsteps echoed down the slope. The look of a mother who loved, but feared. The storm came without warning. The sky darkened by noon. Winds rose from the western valley, flattening the pine rows. Evelyn barely secured her tent ropes in time. Mira herded the cubs into the den, leaving none behind. Only Leon didn't understand. He circled the den, howling in distress. Evelyn bit her lip to keep from stepping out, knowing that even a single appearance might drive Mira away forever. Instead, she lit a small lantern and hung it outside her tent, the only light in the storm. Wind shrieked for 3 hours. Thunder boomed through the valley. Rain poured like a waterfall over stone. Amid nature's roar, Evelyn thought she heard a long, distant howler wolf's voice, echoing, neither near nor far. Leon barked back. Once, twice, then silence. The next morning, Evelyn awoke to soaked earth. The tent stood. The trees stood. But Mira's den was empty. No paw prints, no blood, not a sound. Only a broken branch lay across the entrance, and a tuft of gray-white fur caught on the edge of a rock. She called the names in her mind. No one answered. Sometimes, in nature, love is not enough to erase boundaries. Some instincts are stronger than affection, and some creature seven after choosing to stay are forced to leave, to survive. That night, the rain had not yet fully passed. The last gusts of wind hissed through the cliffs like unspoken warnings. Evelyn sat in her tent, rain-soaked coat clinging to her, fingers gripping the thermal binoculars. Since the storm had passed, she hadn't seen a single movement near the den. All tracks had been erased by water and wind. But then, a faint sound, one that only someone attuned to the forest would notice. A low, guttural snarl, followed by a long, eerie howl. Not Leon's, not a feline. Wolves. Evelyn shot up. She put on her headset and activated the motion radar 3 signals lit up in the southeast, less than 100 meters away. A fourth small and flickering blinked among them. Mira. She didn't think. Gripping her flashlight, she ran. Mud swallowed her ankles, rain slapped her face, but the urgency in that snarl growing sharper pulled her across the slippery slope, through dense pine brush, to a low, rocky clearing hidden from view. There, she saw something she would never forget. Mira stood between her 3 cubs and 3 wolves massive, hungry and unwavering. Her fur bristled, ears pinned back, claws scraping the rock. Evelyn didn't have time to calculate. But something else moved faster. Leon. Out of the darkness, the dog lunged like lightning. No bark, no growl, just a full-force collision into the nearest wolf, knocking it off balance. Mira seized the moment and pounced, biting the neck of the second wolf. The clearing erupted in chaos. Leon took a bite to the shoulder. He howled in pain, but didn't retreat. Evelyn screamed, hurled rocks at the wolves, then switched on her flashlight, blasting its beam directly into their eyes. The sudden assault made them hesitate. Mira seized the pause to snarl, not as a challenge, but as a command. Run. Her cubs bolted into the forest. Leon staggered behind them. The wolves didn't give chase. The light, the noise, the blood, and the fierce resistance told them this was no easy hunt. When Evelyn reached Leon, he was sprawled in the mud, breathing hard. Blood trickled from a gash on his shoulder. Mira was still there, standing over him. She didn't flee. Under the flashlight's glow, two gazes, Methuman and Bobcat. No words were spoken. But Evelyn knew. In that moment, amidst rain and blood, Mira understood. This dog was no longer just another species. He was part of her family. And Evelyn also understood. She was no longer just an observer. Gently, she lifted Leon. Mira stepped back, but didn't turn away. The bobcat cubs peeked from the bushes. The rain had stopped. In that fragile moment between life and loss, something extraordinary happened. 5 beings, human, bobcat, and dog, stood together with no barriers, no doubts. Only life, trust, and the exhausted breath of creatures who had just crossed the final line of instinct. The sky had not yet fully brightened, but the thin mist had begun to retreat from the treetops. Evelyn climbed the rocky slope, Leon wrapped in her gray raincoat, his head resting softly in her arms. His breath was faint, but steady, the breath of a creature not ready to let go. When she reached the makeshift rescue post near the forest's edge, she laid Leon gently on a dry wooden board, hands trembling as she unwrapped the temporary bandage. The bleeding had stopped, but the deep bite needed stitching. In her mind, the image of Mira lingered, standing in mud and blood, neither retreating nor crying out, only silently watching as Evelyn carried Leon away. That look, it wasn't fear, and it wasn't anger. It was surrender. After stitching the wound, Evelyn sat beside Leon all morning. She mixed sugar water and let it drip slowly into his mouth. When he opened his eyes and gave a faint wag of his tail, she nearly cried. Outside, the sun broke through. The scent of pine sap and wet earth rose from the forest floor. Evelyn knew she should return to the main research station. But instead, she rebuilt her tent near the rocky clearing where Mira once made her home. No one asked her to. She simply felt the need to honor a silent promise made in the storm's dark silence. 3 days later, Mira returned. Not with a sound, but a presence quiet and grounded like the earth itself. She emerged from the trees, stopped a few meters from the tent, and sat. No growl, no aggression. She didn't look for Leon. She just waited. Evelyn stepped outside, holding an old shirt still carrying Leon's scent. She laid it gently on the grass, saying nothing. Mira approached, sniffed it for a long moment, then curled beside it. Eyes closed, ears alert. A soft sigh escaped Herond. In that instant, Evelyn knew. Mira wasn't angry. She wasn't hurt. She wasn't lost. Mira had made her choice. Leon wasn't abandoned. He wasn't rejected. Mira had done what only a wild mother could do. Entrust her child to someone she believed in, when she could no longer protect them all. The day Leon recovered and stepped outside the tent, Mira was gone. But her paw prints remained faintly in the dirt like a final message. The young dog lifted his head, ears twitching at the sound of the wind in the trees. He didn't howl. He didn't chase. He simply sat beside Evelyn, as if understanding he stood between two worlds. Evelyn knelt and touched his head gently. "We'll go back," she whispered. Because some bonds are not held by leash or law, but by scar sand, a silent, unshakable decision. Love. Without borders. By the time Leon's legs were steady again, April had arrived. The forest was greener, and morning mist no longer lingered long on the leaves. The wound on his back was now just a patch of dark fur, but something in Leon's eyes had changed. Gone was the wide-eyed wonder of a puppy, replaced by a calm alertness, as if he now understood how fragile life in the wild truly was. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She knew Leon didn't belong in town, nor in the quiet safety of a research facility. She packed a few supplies, brought her first aid kit, and led Leon back to the place where a gray paw print still faintly marked the earth. As they neared the meadow, Leon suddenly stopped. His ears perked up, his eyes fixed on the woods, and then without warning bolted. As if drawn by something deeply familiar, Mira was there, by the stone-lined stream curving at the forest's edge. Not alone. Her 3 cubs were beside her, and just a few feet away lay a 4th still, fragile, curled in the brush. Evelyn approached cautiously. Mira didn't growl. She simply glanced at Leon, then turned her gaze toward the weak cub. The little one, smaller than the others, its fur matted, belly slightly bloated, showed signs of a digestive infection. Evelyn understood immediately. She didn't wait for permission. Opening her pack, she pulled out antibiotics, a syringe, warm cloths. Mira didn't stop her. The lynx mother simply stood between her cubs and the human, watching every move with silent focus. But this time, there was no fear, only trust. Leon lay beside the sick cub, gently licking its fevered head. That gesture alone made Mira raise her head and ease her claws from the soil. Evelyn administered the first injection. The cub flinched, then lay still. She wrapped it in her jacket to preserve its warmth. That night, she slept by the stream with Mira on the opposite bank, and Leon curled close to her side. 2 worlds, separated by water. But their breaths rose and fell as one. By morning, the cub opened its eyes. Pale gold, still tired but no longer glazed. Mira stepped forward, sniffed her baby from head to paw. Then, unexpectedly, she licked Evelyn's hand. Not forceful, not obvious, but real. From that day, everything changed. Evelyn set up a permanent tent by the stream. Mira didn't avoid her. Leon followed the cubs into the woods, playing like an older brother. When Evelyn lit a fire, Mira sometimes returned with a dead squirrel, placing it at her feet, as if to repay a debt. There were no formal boundaries, no agreement, just life shared in its wildest, purest form. No one told Evelyn to do it. There was no research grant, no backing from any institution. But after that spring, after Mira's gaze, after the first time she felt the faint heartbeat of a bobcat cub in her hands, Evelyn knew she could never return to her old life. She formally resigned from the research institute, sold her apartment in the city, and moved to the forest's edge, to a sunlit ridge where the trees filtered golden light and a small stream ran year-round. There, she built a modest sanctuary. No big signs, no iron fences, just wooden huts, a tiny animal clinic, and a narrow path that led into the trees where humans were no longer conquerors. Leon grew into a strong, intelligent, and loyal shepherd. He never crossed the boundaries he set for himself, always lying at the forest's edge, waiting patiently where Mira and her cubs often appeared each morning. When small groups of visitors came, Leon served as their silent guide, never barking, never rushing, just walking calmly ahead, ears alert, as if he understood he was carrying out a sacred duty. Mira still lived deep in the forest, but she never disappeared. Every month, she would show up, sometimes bringing injured animals, sometimes simply to rest beside Leon in the warmth of the afternoon sun. Her cubs had grown, now staking out their own territories, but they always returned as if pulled by an invisible thread tying them to the place that once healed them. The story of Leon and Mira began to spread. At first, the media called it a strange phenomenon. But when Evelyn released her footage, something shifted, not because of science, but because of feeling. People realized that nature wasn't just a battlefield for survival, it was also a web of deep emotions, where gentleness, protection, and bonds could defy species and instinct. Children who visited the sanctuary started to learn how to listen. They would sit for hours by the stream, waiting just to catch a glimpse of Mira. Some even cried when they saw Leon nuzzle into Evelyn's shoulder, because somehow they sensed that inside that dog's heart lived a part of the forest, unnamed but unforgettable. Evelyn didn't call the place a research center. She simply placed a small wooden sign where the impossible once happened. No map could draw the boundary between human and wild. But Evelyn knew, if such a place existed, it wasn't marked by lines on earth. It was shaped by quiet decisions, born from trust and love. And in the heart of the forest, each morning, as sunlight kissed the stream, Leon's footsteps echoed softly, followed by Mira's gray shadow, a quiet reminder. The future is not where we go, but how we choose to live together, one day at a time.